Okay, if you're here looking at this video, you must be looking at buying a second-hand fridge. And I'm talking about a compressor fridge for camping, not residential fridges, not three-way gas and 12 to 40 volt fridges, 12 volt compressor fridges. And one of the things that looks like a 12 volt fridge for camping and isn't is a thing called a cooler. But people advertise them as fridges, camping fridges. They are not fridges. They do not operate as a fridge. They're useless. Don't buy them. They shouldn't be sold in Australia. How do you tell a cooler from a fridge? A cooler will have a heat and a cold function. It will have a button on it, and it'll have a red one for hot and a green part for cool, and it'll say heat and cool, and you can select whether you want it to heat or cool. Compressor fridges do not heat. This is an example of a cooler, a Waco, and the heat cool selector switch is the second button in from the left hand side. So avoid those. People buy them by mistake and then get taken, and then they flog them and they'll tell you they work perfectly. They don't. They do not work. Don't buy it. Okay, coolers out of the way. Gas 12 to 40 volt fridges, I'm not going to talk about. They're a different refrigeration system altogether, and most people are probably now looking at just running compressor fridges with batteries and solar, etc. Okay, so when you go to buy a fridge, do not believe anything anyone tells you. Do not believe stories about how wonderful this thing worked, or they're upgrading from something to something, or they've sold this and they're buying something else and therefore they've got to change fridges. Don't care, not interested. Don't care about how many wonderful camping trips they've done with this fridge. All irrelevant. Don't care about their family, their lovely children and their dog. All irrelevant. Don't listen to any of that. Do not take any notice of the cosmetics of the fridge and go, oh, that looks like it's brand new. It's just come out of the showroom. Must be really great. That is no indication of the performance of the fridge. A lot of relatively new fridges now have gas leaks, or have suffered gas leaks, or slow leaks. Okay, it's very common, frighteningly so, and it was not common. Fridges that are 8 or 10 years old don't do it. So it's something to do with fridges that are manufactured in China and are probably not manufactured as well as they should be. All right, so that's the thing to be avoided. So how do you check to make sure the fridge is working properly? I reckon the best test is, so you're going to look at a fridge. It could be a fridge or fridge only, single compartment, or a dual compartment fridge freezer. If it's in either of those cases, you want the fridge set to -10. A fridge that has lost gas or is not performing properly may perform properly down to 0 degrees or +3 or whatever. So it will look like it's working. It will also, when you switch it on, feel cold, and it will pull down to a certain point. But it will not work down into the minuses, and it certainly will not cycle. So this is a couple of key factors. If you're looking at a dual zone fridge, get one compartment set to -10 and one compartment set to +3. Okay, here's an example. This is a Black Rhino fridge I have here. It's working fine. This is a 43 litre. It's a dual zone. So you'll see here I've got this side set to -10. I've got this side set to +3. And this fridge is running at the moment because it's one of these has just been on. If I push the button once, you can see that that's set to 10, -10. Push this button once, that's set to 3. And you must check all these buttons work up and down. Make sure the temperature can be adjusted. So check all the buttons function. Sometimes these switches wear out. But here's an example of one. So by looking at this, I can tell this fridge is working okay, because it is maintaining the set temperature, -10.3. This might be 4 or 5 or 2. This might be 8 through to 11, but you know, effectively it's right. If you see a fridge that's been set to -10 and it's at -18, then there's something wrong with it. Or if it's been set to +3 but it's actually freezing everything, then it's got a faulty thermistor, which is the temperature sensor, and that may be, depending on the fridge, easy, difficult or impossible to change. I suppose there's a way around everything, but it could be quite an expensive exercise. But anyway, be wary. By having these temperatures set to not at their extremes, you can check to make sure the fridge is setting temperatures as it should. Again, these -10 is pushing the temperature sensor to its extreme, so it checks to make sure that it's functioning correctly. If it's a single zone, -10, minimum run time's an hour and a half before you go to look at it. You want that switched on at least an hour and a half before you go. That gives it time to pull the temperature down, and it should be cycling when you get there. So if you stand there for 10 minutes, it maybe cycles on and off, you know, and then you know that it's managing to do that. So that's important. If you've got exposed evaporator plate on the inside, now what do I mean by that? That's when you look inside, you can see little tracks around the metal, cold, the part that gets cold on the inside, called the evaporator plate. Those tracks, if they are exposed, you can see these little tracks that run around, and they're like a big continuous loop. Make sure that hasn't got dents in it. I've covered that on another video. Because that will restrict the flow of refrigerant, and it will have a very slow response time to trying to pull the temperature down. When you put warm things in, like you restock your beer, it will take a long time for it to get to temperature. Sometimes those fridges, they will get to temperature, but it may take 4 hours where it should take 1 hour. So that's what the basket's for. Part of the reason the basket is in those type of fridges is to make sure that those sidewalls don't get damaged. And people take the baskets out and leave them out. And the result is you can start. So if you take a torch along with you and you look around the inside, you can see these dings all around it. I wouldn't buy it. Okay, so it should have a basket. Good to have a case on it. An insulated bag that go around the outside. They are good because the insulation's not as good as it should be, as it used to be on fridges. They're using much cheaper expander foam in the walls for fridges now that's got very poor insulation properties. So bags preferential, you know, because it keeps the wind away from the fridge, or, you know, the heat off it, the direct heat off it. It certainly helps. If the fridge can be running on 240 volts, if it runs on 240 volts, then 95% of the time it'll be fine on 12, but I would check it on 12. If people don't have power cords and stuff, don't buy the fridge. If you cannot see this thing going, don't buy it. All right, so we've covered that off. Don't buy coolers. Buy a fridge that suits your needs. Don't buy one that's really big because you think you might need it. It takes more work for a fridge to cool down, a mass of stuff when you put a lot of stuff in it. And every time you open it, it lets a bit of the cold out, particularly in warm weather, so it takes longer to recover. So if you don't need a huge fridge, don't buy a huge fridge. You cannot run a fridge off the car battery alone. That's not feasible. You will flatten your battery in 24 hours of your car if you go camping and leave your fridge plugged in and running off it, because they use about 50 amp hours a day. Your car batteries are probably only 60 or 70 amp hour rated capacity. You can only ever use 50% of your car battery's capacity in any case in a lead acid battery. So it's important you understand you buy what you need. Also, do not buy a fridge, and if somebody says, don't want anything in it, when they put that fridge up, when you say, I want it on for an hour and a half before I get there, etc., don't want anything in it, completely empty. That fridge is quite capable of getting down to temperature without any assistance. I've heard a lot of people say, I throw a couple of 2-litre frozen milk bottles with frozen water in them to help the fridge start. It shouldn't need any help. It does not need any help. If it's working properly, it'll be at working temperature in an hour or so. So you put cold stuff in from the fridge and switch it on as you do it, maybe for half an hour before. That's it. You don't need any water bottles full of ice in there. That means there's something not right. Again, so don't want anything in it. Okay, don't want anybody saying, I'll put these in, because then you're going to go and put your hand in and go, yeah, that feels cold. That's an artificial cold. It's not necessarily generated by the fridge. Anyway, look, I hope that helps. It's just that I see so many people coming in and buying fridges and getting caught out. Most people are pretty good, but there's a lot of these. I tell you, there's a huge number of fridges with faults that I shouldn't be seeing, and people are selling them to them for not working. Saying great DIY project. They're not. That's crap. You can't fix it yourself. in the majority of cases. If it's got a serious fault, you do not want a refrigeration fault. If it's an electronic fault, that's one thing, but even then you don't know if that manufacturer supports their product for any length of time with spare parts. A lot of them don't. They don't bring in spare panels, display controllers or anything, or they've only got limited. They might bring in spares for 1 or 2 years after they've been selling that model, and then they stop supporting it. So manufacturers like Waco tend to have very long-term supply of parts for fridges that are quite dated, but those old fridges work fine. Don't ever be scared of buying a 10-year-old fridge. They work better than the new ones. They just don't get these leak problems, and the electronics parts is easy to fix relatively. So all right, so there's some thoughts on buying a second-hand fridge. Be wary, be careful, don't believe anybody, what they tell you. Don't base it based on Kohler's Cosmetics. See it running, make sure it's cycling, make sure it can get to -10. It doesn't matter on the dual zones, you only have to have one side at -10 because that proves the refrigeration system's working. It doesn't have to be doing it both sides, but having one at -10, one +3, that lets you check to see it's swapping correctly between sides. Very important. All right, I'll leave it at that for the moment. That'll do. Cheers.